What if the safest person in From is actually the one who has been hiding the biggest truth? Not Boyd, not Jade, not the boy in white.
Victor.
For years, the town has treated Victor as the broken survivor, the frightened child who simply lived longer than everyone else. A man trapped in the past because of unimaginable trauma. But what if that's exactly what the town wants everyone to believe? Because the more you watch Victor, the stranger his behavior becomes. He always knows more than he should. He arrives before disasters happen. He tells people just enough to survive, but never enough to understand. And every time someone gets close to the truth, Victor changes the subject. Coincidence? Or a pattern? Because here's what changes everything. This theory isn't claiming Victor is evil. It's much more disturbing than that. It suggests Victor has been lying since the very first episode. Not by telling false stories, but by hiding the most important parts of the truth. And if that's correct, then every mystery in From has been built on information Victor deliberately kept from everyone. Look at what the show is actually telling us. When new people arrive, Victor never acts surprised.
He studies them. He watches them.
Almost like he's trying to decide what they should know. Think about that for a second. If you've spent decades trapped inside a nightmare, wouldn't your first instinct be to tell newcomers everything? Every danger, every rule, every strange event you've ever witnessed. Instead, Victor does the opposite. He speaks in fragments. He gives tiny pieces of information. He disappears without explanation. He lets people discover horrors on their own.
Why?
The easy answer is trauma. And yes, Victor is deeply traumatized. The show makes that painfully clear. But trauma alone doesn't explain consistency. Victor doesn't randomly forget things. He selectively avoids certain conversations. Those are two very different behaviors. And this is where it gets darker. Notice how often Victor says, "I don't want to talk about it," or "It's not time." Those aren't the words of someone who simply can't remember. Those are the words of someone making a decision. A decision about what other people are allowed to know. That's not the real mystery. The real mystery is why. Why would Victor hide information when every hidden truth leads to more deaths? Unless knowing too much creates an even bigger danger. This is the detail everyone missed. Victor has survived longer than almost anyone. Not because he's stronger. Not because he's faster. Not because he's lucky. Because he understands rules no one else understands. Rules he almost never explains. Every survivor in the town learns by making mistakes. Victor already knows the consequences before they happen. Ask yourself this. How many times has Victor warned someone without explaining why? It happens again and again and again. He'll tell someone not to go somewhere.
Not to touch something.
Not to ask certain questions. But he almost never gives the full reason. That's incredibly unusual. Imagine trying to save someone's life. Wouldn't you explain everything you know? Victor rarely does. Instead, he expects people to trust him, almost as if explaining the truth would break an invisible rule. Now think about the objects Victor protects. His drawings, his memories, his personal hiding places, his collections. To everyone else, they're childhood keepsakes. But what if they're actually evidence? Not memories of the past. Records. Think about how Victor draws. He doesn't draw emotions. He documents events, locations, people, creatures, symbols, changes. Almost like someone keeping an archive. An archive no one else is allowed to read completely. Because every time another character discovers one of Victor's drawings, something important is hidden. Something is interrupted. Or Victor immediately redirects their attention. That's not accidental storytelling. That's deliberate writing. The writers constantly place information in front of us, then stop us from fully understanding it. And Victor is almost always standing between the audience and the answer. But here's something even stranger. Victor doesn't just protect information. He protects certain places. He reacts differently around specific locations inside the town. Sometimes he becomes nervous before anyone else senses danger. Other times he refuses to enter places without explanation.
How?
How does he know? The obvious answer is experience. But experience has limits. You can recognize familiar dangers. You can't predict completely new ones. Yet Victor often behaves as though he already expects what's coming, almost like he's seen different versions of the same story repeat over and over and over again. That's a terrifying possibility, because if the town works in cycles, Victor may not simply remember the past. He may remember previous versions of the town's game. And if that's true, then every choice he makes carries knowledge nobody else possesses. Knowledge powerful enough to save lives, or completely change humanity's understanding of what the town really is. But instead of revealing everything, Victor stays silent. And silence may be the biggest lie he's ever told. Now, let's test this theory against the evidence. Because a good theory doesn't depend on one strange moment. It depends on a pattern. And Victor's pattern has been hiding in plain sight since the beginning. The first thing people notice about Victor is that he seems disconnected from reality. He wanders alone. He talks to himself. He carries his lunchbox. He draws pictures. He speaks like a frightened child trapped inside an adult's body. That image makes everyone lower their guard, even the audience. We assume Victor is confused. But look closer. Whenever the town reaches a turning point, Victor suddenly becomes incredibly focused. His memory sharpens. His decisions become precise. He knows exactly where to go, exactly who to follow, exactly what matters. That isn't random behavior. It's as if two different versions of Victor exist. One who appears lost, and another who becomes frighteningly aware whenever the town begins changing. But here's what changes everything. Think about how Victor responds whenever someone asks the right question. Not just any question. The dangerous ones. Questions about the beginning.
Questions about the children.
Questions about the symbols. Questions about what happened before everyone else arrived. His reaction is almost always the same. He freezes. He changes the subject. Or he walks away. Most viewers read this as emotional trauma. But trauma usually creates emotional reactions. Victor often makes strategic reactions. There is a difference. If someone asks you about a painful memory, you may become emotional. Victor becomes careful. That word matters. Careful. Almost as if he is calculating how much information can safely leave his mouth. Look at what the show is actually telling us. Jade spends almost the entire series chasing answers. He studies symbols. He questions impossible events. He refuses to accept easy explanations. And every time Jade gets close to discovering something important, Victor appears. Sometimes to interrupt. Sometimes to redirect. Sometimes to offer just enough information to send Jade in another direction. Never enough to solve the mystery. Only enough to keep him moving. Ask yourself one question. If Victor truly wants everyone to escape, why has he never sat down with Jade and explained everything he knows? Jade is probably the most determined investigator in the town. He's exactly the kind of person Victor should trust. Instead, Victor limits the conversation. Again, and again, and again. That isn't simply withholding information. That's controlling the pace of discovery. And this is where it gets darker. The boy in white clearly trusts Victor more than anyone else. That relationship has always felt unusual. The boy in white rarely communicates openly with the other survivors. But Victor understands him better than anyone.
Why?
Because they've known each other longer? Maybe. But what if there's another explanation? What if Victor has spent years learning which truths can be spoken and which truths bring consequences? Notice something fascinating. The boy in white never gives complete answers either. He also speaks in fragments. He also appears only when necessary. He also guides people without explaining the full picture. Doesn't that sound familiar? Victor and the boy in white use almost the exact same method. They reveal only what is absolutely necessary. Nothing more. That similarity cannot be ignored. Because it suggests Victor didn't invent this behavior. He learned it. Someone taught him that knowledge must be controlled. And if that's true, then information itself may be dangerous inside the town. Think about every major revelation in From. Almost every breakthrough comes with a cost. Someone dies. Someone disappears. Someone loses their sanity. Someone sees something impossible. The town seems to punish understanding. That is a pattern. The closer people move toward the truth, the more violently reality pushes back. Now Victor's silence begins to look completely different. Maybe he isn't protecting himself. Maybe he's protecting everyone else. But here's the terrifying twist. Protecting people with lies is still lying. And that's not the real mystery. The real mystery is whether Victor even has a choice. Imagine living in the town for decades, watching hundreds of people arrive, watching almost all of them die. Imagine discovering that every time someone learns a certain truth, something worse happens. Wouldn't you eventually stop telling people? Wouldn't you begin hiding information? Wouldn't you convince yourself that silence saves lives? That idea transforms Victor completely. He's no longer just a traumatized survivor. He's become the keeper of dangerous knowledge, a man forced to decide which truths the town allows people to hear. Now go back to his drawings. Everyone assumes they're memories. But what if they're instructions? A secret archive designed for someone in the future. Not everyone. One specific person. Think about how often Victor stores drawings instead of displaying them. Why hide them? If they're only memories, they should comfort him. Instead, he protects them like evidence in a locked case. Because evidence only matters when someone is meant to discover it later. This is the detail everyone missed. Victor never destroys his drawings. He preserves them, even when he refuses to explain them. That means he expects someone, eventually, to understand what they really mean. And once you see that pattern, his entire character changes. Victor may not be hiding the truth because he forgot it. He may be hiding it because he's waiting for the one person capable of surviving it. And if that person has finally arrived, then Victor's silence is about to end. But when it does, the truth may prove that the monsters were never the town's greatest secret. Because what if Victor's biggest secret isn't what he knows about the monsters? What if the real secret is what he knows about the town itself? For years, everyone has focused on the creatures that come out at night. The smiling monsters, the tunnels, the strange voices, the impossible roads. But Victor has always seemed less afraid of the creatures than everyone else. And that detail matters. Because fear comes from uncertainty. You fear something when you don't understand it. But Victor? Victor understands the rules. He knows when to hide. He knows where to go. He knows which places are dangerous. Almost like the monsters are not the thing that scares him. Almost like he has already learned something far worse. The monsters may only be one part of the system. And Victor may know who built that system. Look at what the show is actually telling us. Victor arrived in the town when he was just a child, meaning his entire understanding of normal life was destroyed before he was old enough to fully process it. But instead of breaking completely, he adapted. He created rules. He created routines. He created a way to survive. That is not just a trauma response. That is evolution. Victor became someone who could exist inside the impossible. And this is where it gets darker. Maybe Victor didn't survive because he was lucky. Maybe Victor survived because the town needed him alive. Think about it. Why is Victor still here after all these years? Why did the town allow one person to survive for decades? Why him? The town has taken countless lives. It has destroyed families. It has broken people's minds. Yet Victor remains. That suggests something important. Victor may not simply be a victim of the town. He may be connected to its purpose. Not as the creator. Not as the villain. But as a key piece of the puzzle. A witness. A memory. A living record of everything that happened before. Because without Victor, the past disappears. And maybe that's exactly what the town wants. A place where nobody remembers. A place where every new group arrives believing they are the first. But Victor breaks that cycle. He remembers. And memories are dangerous. Because the town survives through confusion. It survives because people don't understand the rules. The less they know, the easier they are to control. But Victor is the one person who remembers the pattern. The one person who can connect the past to the present. And that makes him incredibly important. Now, let's revisit one of the strangest parts of Victor's character. His obsession with measuring time. The trees. The drawings. The changes around the town. Victor notices when things are different. He notices when something has moved. He notices when the environment changes.
Why?
Because he isn't just surviving. He's monitoring, like someone tracking an experiment. And that word changes everything. Experiment. What if the town is not random? What if every person who arrives is part of a larger test? A test of fear. A test of survival. A test of human behavior. If so, Victor has been watching the experiment longer than anyone alive. He's seen the same mistakes repeated. He's seen people refuse to believe. He's seen people search for answers. He's seen people lose hope. And maybe that's why he doesn't react normally anymore. Because Victor has learned something everyone else hasn't. The town does not simply kill people. It studies them. Now, the biggest question becomes, has Victor been helping people escape? Or has he been helping the town maintain the cycle?
Because think about this.
Every time someone gets close to leaving, something happens. A new mystery appears. A new danger arrives. A new distraction takes over. And Victor is always nearby. This doesn't mean Victor is evil. It means Victor may be trapped in a role he doesn't fully understand. A role where he must preserve the balance. A role where revealing everything could destroy the only system keeping people alive. But here's the terrifying possibility. What if Victor's biggest lie was not hiding the past? What if his biggest lie was telling everyone that escape is possible? Because maybe Victor knows something nobody else knows. Maybe the town isn't a place people are trapped inside. Maybe the town is a place people are chosen for. And Victor was chosen first. The first survivor. The first witness. The first person to understand that this place follows rules. And if that's true, then every person who arrived after Victor was never discovering a new nightmare. They were entering an old one. A cycle that Victor has already watched happen before. But now something is different. Jade is finding symbols. Tabitha is discovering connections. Boyd is breaking rules. The town is changing. The cycle may finally be reaching a point Victor has never seen before. And that creates the biggest question of all. If Victor has spent decades protecting the truth, what happens when the truth no longer wants to stay hidden? Because maybe Victor wasn't waiting for someone to save him. Maybe he was waiting for someone strong enough to survive what he knows. And when Victor finally tells the complete story, the town's biggest secret may not be about the monsters. It may be about why Victor was allowed to live. Because the scariest possibility is this. Victor wasn't the only survivor of the first nightmare. He may have been the reason the nightmare continued.